The National Desk, America's News Now. Holiday gun violence continues. The data supporting an Independence Day mass shooting pattern as people realize anyone could be a victim.
This is just a tragedy at the most profound, deepest level. We're talking about completely innocent bystanders who did absolutely nothing to put themselves at risk, and they've suffered this horrifying consequence.
Then how did it get there? The latest on cocaine found inside the White House, who it may have belonged to.
When people visit the West Wing, there is the area of the West Wing where it is highly traveled, and that is what happens.
And UPS delivers roughly 6% of all U.S. goods and services. What happens if they stop? The latest on the ongoing labor talks. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. A fourth person has died after a mass shooting last night at a block party in Shreveport, Louisiana, where 7 others were hurt. One of those is in critical condition right now. A city councilwoman saying that officials now plan to use a drone to search for more possible victims in an area with tall grass and dense vegetation where that fourth victim was discovered. Police say they believe several people exchanged gunfire. It's not clear what led up to that, and no arrests have been made at this point. And we're also learning that a 14-year-old boy was killed at another block party happening overnight in Salisbury, Maryland. 6 others were hurt and are expected to survive. Police say they're writing up search warrants right now as suspects have been identified. And more violence in the nation's capital. Police are looking for a gunman after 9 people were shot early this morning. That includes 2 children. All are expected to survive. Now, this comes after 2 men were fatally shot yesterday in 2 separate incidents. And in Philadelphia, Kim Brady Carricker, whose mugshot you see right here, remains in jail now after being denied bail this morning. The magistrate calling him a threat to public safety and a flight risk. Carricker is accused of killing 5 men ages 15 to 59 Monday night. The next court appearance for Carricker is set for July 24th. And Carricker has a previous gun conviction and was carrying an AR-15 and an untraceable ghost gun on the night of that shooting, both believed to have been obtained illegally. Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner said the motive seems to have been to just kill people.
By all indications, a couple days into the investigation, this was random. This was someone who set out to kill strangers, which of course has become way too common in the United States. We also know that he appears to have had no connection to any of the victims, that none of the victims had any connection to each other.
A disturbing pattern developing around the 4th of July. According to the Gun Violence Archive, the holiday has more mass shootings than any other day of the year going back to 2014. Now, mass shooting is defined as when 4 or more people are hurt or killed. That does not include the shooter. In the past 9 years, double-digit mass shootings on a single day have only occurred 4 times. 3 of those over the July 4th holiday weekends of 2020, 2021, and 2022. Since this past Friday, there have been 17 mass shootings across 13 states, leaving at least 18 dead and almost 100 injured. We have new details now coming in here about the white powder found at the White House while the first family was away this past weekend. After further testing, it has been confirmed to be cocaine. The Secret Service now investigating how that got into the White House and who it may have belonged to. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre saying that White House officials are not part of that investigation.
We're not assisting in anything. This is under the Secret Service purview. This is their kind of guidance and guideline, their world, and so we're going to let them do their job. We are not involved in this.
The loved ones of victims of the 2018 Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting got to visit the building in Parkland, Florida for the first time since that massacre. It's all part of an effort to give these families some kind of closure to the tragedy that happened 5 years ago.
Entering the building where my daughter was shot was among the top 5 hardest things I've ever had to do.
At the parents' request, guided tours led by prosecutors, law enforcement officers, and victim advocates began this afternoon. Public access is not allowed. And when these tours are completed, the building will be demolished, but no date has been set yet. Two Ohio groups say they've submitted more than 700,000 signatures to put an amendment on the fall ballot enshrining abortion rights in the state's constitution. Today's the final day for those signatures to be collected. Now, the minimum number of signatures needed to make November's ballot is 413,446, but the advocates aimed to surpass that number just to ensure that enough names are legible and therefore eligible. State officials will verify signatures until July 20th. Ohio's Secretary of State will then decide by July 25th whether to include the measure on the November ballot. Meantime, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds wants to renew her efforts to restrict abortions in her state. She's called for a special legislative session to begin July 11th. The state Supreme Court struck down a law last month that would have banned most abortions after 6 weeks. A federal judge has ruled Biden administration officials, which includes government agencies, can no longer communicate with social media companies unless there's a criminal or national security reason to do so. National correspondent Christine Frizzau explains the ins and outs of the case and the fallout.
It was a stunning revelation last summer.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, you should be on high alert.
From Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg to Twitter's former head of trust and safety, laying out multiple examples of back-channel communications between the federal government and big tech in regards to a story about Hunter Biden's laptop and information about the COVID-19 pandemic, which sometimes led to posts being taken down or restricted. Louisiana's Attorney General Jeff Landry, along with former Attorney General Eric Schmidt of Missouri, now a U.S. Senator, filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration for violating the First Amendment.
What the government can do is, this administration can stand up there with the press secretary and say, look, we believe X, Y, and Z. What they can't do then is threaten and coerce social media companies to take down differing points of view. Dissent. That's what they did here.
A federal judge agreeing, now barring multiple federal agencies and several government officials from engaging in any communication of any kind with social media companies. In his ruling this week, writing that during the COVID-19 pandemic, a period characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty, the U.S. government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. That widespread doubt and uncertainty, though, a top reason why the Biden administration says it got involved to provide information to these social media companies and to protect public health at a time misinformation about COVID-19 was spreading faster than the virus itself.
If they find themselves infected with the coronavirus using Miracle Mineral Solution.
Social media platforms rife with people trying to make money off fake COVID cures, which could harm people. Top health officials arguing it was their job to protect them. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
Check this out. A train carrying wheat seed and bentonite clay derailed in Wisconsin. A Canadian Pacific rep says 29 train cars went off the tracks near Reeseville, nearly 40 miles northeast of Madison. Law enforcement officials say there were no injuries and no hazardous waste spilled. The cause still under investigation. Keep in mind, on average, there are nearly 1,700 train derailments each year. Cleanup underway now after a building exploded in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, early this morning. A worker alerted authorities after he smelled propane in the building, which led to a prompt evacuation before that explosion. Some nearby buildings and equipment were also damaged. Officials say a propane leak is to blame. Another person has been arrested in the deadly kidnapping of 4 Americans in Matamoros, Mexico, earlier this year. 2 people survived that kidnapping. 2 were killed traveling from South Carolina to Mexico. Now, that group was shot at in their car and taken away in a truck. They were later found in a house. At least 7 people have been arrested in the case so far. Mail theft surging across the U.S., and it might change the way you send payments. USPS confirming an increase in robberies of letter carriers and theft in a statement to USA Today today. In May, the Postal Service reported more than 300 mail carriers were robbed while delivering mail in the first half of the fiscal year. In that same time frame, more than 25,000 high-volume thefts were reported. These thieves oftentimes looking for checks that they can doctor and then cash. Now, here's what you can do to protect yourself. If possible, you want to send electronic or virtual payments. Retrieve your mail daily. Don't drop mail into collection boxes overnight. Instead, take your mail to the post office. The Postal Service also saying that you can sign up for informed delivery. That lets you know via email what you're going to get via snail mail, and you can pause mail delivery while you're out of town. Right now, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on her way to China for a 3-day trip aimed at easing tensions. She's set to talk with senior Chinese officials in an effort to increase communications between our two countries. The secretary is not expected, however, to meet with President Xi Jinping. Coming up here on the National Desk, the heat is on. The daily record set and the heat advisory is currently in place. And we're one step closer to a major economic disruption, the finger pointing keeping people away from the negotiating table. And later, activists arrested. Why Wimbledon was disrupted today, the reason behind it. We're back in 90 seconds. That looming UPS Teamsters strike we've been telling you about taking a giant step forward now. Negotiations breaking apart this morning, both parties walking away from the negotiating table. The current labor agreement ends July 31st, and there are no indications now that a new deal is close, although UPS does remain optimistic. The Teamsters union said it's unanimously opposed to the package being offered, each side blaming the other for ending these negotiations. But if no deal's reached, 340,000 workers could go on strike August 1st. The sentencing process for the man who killed 23 people at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, began today. Patrick Crucius has already pleaded guilty to 90 charges connected to the August 2019 shooting and declined to make a statement on his own behalf. Prosecutors are seeking to have him serve dozens of consecutive life sentences. His sentence will be determined after the families of victims testify in a hearing that's expected to last several days. The test to becoming a U.S. citizen is getting some updates. Some suggestions include a speaking section requiring the test taker to describe a photo. Another includes making the history and government sections multiple choice. U.S. officials say the changes would help standardize the tests. However, critics say it would make it more difficult for people to pass. There will be a trial of these changes with a new test version expected next year. Firefighters are working to contain another wildfire burning now in Washington state. The McEwen fire near the city of Shelton is covering more than 250 acres. That fire started yesterday and several neighborhoods had to be evacuated. Crews are strengthening lines around it, hoping to contain the flames. Early this morning, Iran tried to capture 2 oil tankers near the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian ships fired shots at one of the tankers, but there have been no reports of major damage or casualties to either ship. U.S. Navy spokesperson Commander Tim Hawkins saying the Iranian Navy did make attempts to seize commercial tankers lawfully transiting international waters. The U.S. Navy responded immediately and prevented those seizures. Both ships were able to continue on with their voyage. Millions of Americans are under heat alerts today. The worst of it is in Arizona, where temperatures could exceed 110 degrees. You have parts of California, Oregon, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Florida, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, all under heat advisories. It's hot out there. Now, this comes as yesterday was the hottest day ever recorded, according to the U.S. National Centers for Environmental Protection. Monday's average global temperature had already broken the record at 62.62 degrees Fahrenheit. Then Tuesday surpassed that at 62.92 degrees. Scientists say that record could be broken a few more times this year. Last month, also a record-breaking scorcher. European computer model data finds the globe set a record for the warmest June since at least 1940. Recreational marijuana is now legal in 23 states and Washington, D.C. Sales started in New York, Missouri, and Maryland over the weekend, but there are signs of opposition in red states like Arkansas, Oklahoma, and the Dakotas, which have all rejected adult use referendums. Legalization efforts are stuck, but still alive in New Hampshire and North Carolina, and advocates are pushing for referendums in the states of Florida and Ohio. You may want to ask your doctor about the right weight for your height, according to some new guidelines. As medical reporter Liz Bonus explains, the BMI is now a hot health debate.
Hey there, everybody. This battle over BMI, or body mass index, has been brewing for a while now. The American Medical Association recently updated its policy on using BMI as a tool for assessing health and obesity. BMI is a measure of body fat based on height and weight, but obesity specialists say other things may be better predictors of your future health, such as where you carry that weight. Dr. George Kurlakian is an obesity surgeon with Ohio's TriHealth.
I think we are finding out that the real culprit is that visceral fat, or the fat in the middle portion of your body, the fat storage in the middle portion of your body, as the real determinant of disease.
Others, such as Renee Mahaffey-Harris of the Center for Closing the Health Gap, say the other concern about using BMI is that cultural diversity wasn't taken into account when the BMI numbers were assigned.
We've known for many years, many decades, that the BMI calculator, or the way in which BMI is calculated, was disproportionate to based on race, specifically those who are not Hispanic white. Were not necessarily very representative of the data that configured that calculator.
Now, just in case you're wondering about the current numbers, here's the way they stack up. Under 18.5 as a BMI is underweight. The healthy weight range is about 25 to 30. It falls within the overweight range if you are 30 or higher, and then obesity at 35. Right now, it's suggested these numbers be used as one assessment tool, but not the only one for your future health risks. Waist measurements, such as under 40 for guys, 35 for women, good tool for health. Blood pressure that's no more than 120/80, also a good number. And even measuring body fat versus muscle mass can be measured. Good ranges, 21 to 32 for most women, 8 to 19% for guys. Now, body fat suggestions are slightly higher in those who are older. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Back to you.
Another tool to help you make better eating decisions is coming back to the market. Weight loss brand Jenny Craig will be coming back in the fall. Nutrisystem's parent company, Wellful Incorporated, acquired the business and will revive it as an online health coaching tool instead of opening physical locations. Jenny Craig, which opened in 1983, declared bankruptcy back in May. Many people have trouble remembering names, finding words, multitasking, or paying attention as they get older and older, but those changes are not inevitable. A new AARP report highlights 6 ways to reduce your risk of cognitive decline as you age. First, get a good night's sleep. Manage stress. Stay active. Eat healthy. Be social. And engage your brain. The National Desk taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Oregon with the National Veterans Wheelchair Games.
It's the kickoff of the National Veterans Wheelchair Games.
It's incredible. Incredible.
The games are open to all veterans with disabilities, including spinal cord injuries, amputations, or other neurological conditions that require a wheelchair.
23 adaptive sports, and over the next week we'll have both individual competition as well as several team competitions. Wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair soccer, and then a whole host of individual sports throughout the week.
Event officials say every year, hundreds of veterans from World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and others serving all the way up to now attend. The event that started in 1981, making its debut in Portland this year.
I probably would never came to Portland in my life. Shout out Portland.
I hope nobody else falls into his hands.
The owners of KJ Teppanyaki, Adriana and Geronimo Nicanor, known as Chef Nico, are now speaking out against a food truck fabrication and manufacturing company in Ceres. That's after they say they hired builder Fernando Ochoa to customize a brand new food truck and never heard from him again.
A month go by, he started calling him, he started texting him. He got no answer. I called his office, his business. Nobody would pick up.
They say Ochoa took their dream and their hard-earned money.
The daycare just wasn't really truly equipped to get and help his needs.
Labna Remington's now 5-year-old son Noah was diagnosed with autism just before he was 2 years old. Since his diagnosis, he's gone through 4 daycares in the last 4 years before being placed in a specialized school.
The regular daycare, it wasn't structured enough for his needs.
And finding a specialized school for children with autism didn't come easy.
It took over probably 2 years and a lot of phone calls, a lot of paperwork, a lot of no's. I mean, I can't even tell you how devastating it was.
Joanna had a similar experience in daycares with her now 7-year-old son, also named Noah. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 and was kicked out of 3 different daycares until he was able to go to public school.
He wasn't even there like a month. They said he was just too much to handle. Then we tried a new location and it was the same thing.
And explaining that to a young child?
It took an emotional toll on all of us. It was hard to explain why you can't go back.
A recent study by the University of California, Riverside found 1 in 6 children with autism are expelled from their preschool programs.
Coming up, the impact of a lifeguard shortage that got worse after the pandemic and what some cities are now doing about it. We're back after this. This summer, pools across the country are cutting hours or even days due to a shortage of lifeguards that's spilling over from last year. The National Desk's Angela Brown explains.
The lifeguard shortage preceded the pandemic, but COVID made it worse. Last year, more than a third of the 300,000 public pools felt the impact of the lifeguard shortage, and we're seeing a repeat this year. Tracking lifeguard shortages coast to coast. New York City pools opening at a limited capacity. LA County pools cutting hours. Same situation in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and across the country. And it's not just city pools that the American Lifeguard Association is worried about.
It's easy for the parks. There's 309,000 that are going to be affected to lock it down and put a lock on the gate. But what's tough is those open water areas, because where there aren't lifeguards, people are still coming.
Take Rhode Island. It's hard to miss these signs. No lifeguard on duty. Sinclair journalists reporting 5 Rhode Island state beaches open without lifeguards over this past holiday weekend. But that's not stopping parents from bringing their kids to the beach who feel safe in the calm waters.
It's pretty good here. It's shallow and it's good for the kids, so it's good depth for them. and that way you don't have to worry about them going too far out and being taken away by waves.
The American Academy of Pediatrics says about 70% of drowning deaths among children 15 years old and younger happen between May and August each year. Without a lifeguard, many city pools are cutting hours to save lives.
We like to say swim in front of a lifeguard. Your chances of drowning in front of a lifeguard are 1 in 18 million.
Some cities are now offering pay incentives to attract lifeguards. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
2 months after his coronation in London, King Charles III finally celebrated in Scotland. Bagpipes, kilts, drums, and a Shetland pony parading down Edinburgh's Royal Mile to celebrate. Meantime, protesters there holding signs saying, "Not my king." Subway's upgrading its menu to keep up with competitors now. The U.S. locations now freshly slicing deli meat starting today. It's a sandwich chain's biggest change in 2 years. Most stores will display the $6,000 slicers near the deli counter so you can see them. U.S. Subway restaurant sales are lagging behind rivals despite some strong digital growth recently. Coming up here on the National Desk, the Powerball lottery is in the hundreds of millions of dollars once again. How it ranks in the largest drawings of all time. We're back in 90 seconds. Two people were arrested at the Wimbledon tennis tournament for protesting environmental issues. A woman and a man wearing T-shirts from the group Just Stop Oil disrupted a match by throwing confetti and puzzle pieces onto the court before being taken away by security guards. Then later, a third activist was escorted out for scattering confetti. On Independence Day in New Hampshire, check this out. A fawn learned the joy of freedom after getting stuck in a hole in the ground. You see it right there. Now, the man that spotted this fawn called the police, seeing the baby deer trapped under a rock in his backyard, unsure of how the heck it got in there. Well, an officer dug around the animal, eventually freed it, and the fawn ran off, maybe to go back to its mom. The Powerball jackpot right now is over $500 million ahead of tonight's drawing, and it's estimated at $546 million with $282 million cash value there after taxes. Got to pay Uncle Sam. The last jackpot winner was April 19th on a ticket sold in Ohio. The highest jackpot winner ever, worth more than $2 billion, was sold last November in California. Good luck if you're playing. That's it for us right now. Join me tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. You want to check your local listings. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Thanks for watching. See you later.